Good evening. I'm Tom McKeon, the president of Tulsa Community College, and it's a great pleasure for me to welcome each of you tonight to our Second Chance Scholarship Dinner. Before I begin with my opening comments, I'd like to ask you to join with me in thanking the jazz ensemble from TCC for the music earlier this evening. The Second Chance Scholarship is a fund that helps pay for tuition and textbooks for incarcerated men and women participating in TCC's Correction Education Program, a partnership between the college and the Oklahoma Department of Corrections. Its mission is to give offenders useful skills that will help them find employment upon release and the ability to construct a positive life. The program began with just 19 students in 2007 and has grown to more than 200 enrollments in 35 college classes taught by TCC faculty. In addition to the 22 certificates of completion awarded to students at the Turley Women Residential Center, we are pleased to report that tomorrow at the Dick Connor Correction Facility in Hominy, 39 men will be awarded one or more certificates of achievement, and 6 men will be awarded their associate degrees. Among these offenders, we have 9 that have been recently released from prison, 6 have found employment, and 1 is expected to graduate from TCC next year. These success stories are why we are committed to ensuring that offenders who meet rigorous selection criteria and who want to take college classes can so without funding. We are grateful for the tremendous support of the Zarro Foundation, who joined us last year as a supporter of our prison program. We also want to thank the following groups that helped bring this event together this evening: the Tulsa Shock, the Chickasaw Nation, the Muskogee Creek Nation, Williams, Mag Sullivan, Margaret Ellison and Lynn Martin, St. Benedict Parish, TCC West Campus, the TCC Foundation, Gourmet to Go, Platt College, and the food tonight is from the Upper Crust and executive chef Fad Butari. Also in your program are lists of other supporters of tonight's Second Chance Scholarship Dinner. Please join me in giving all these individuals a round of applause. Someone who shares TCC vision of giving offenders a second chance is Chef Jeff Henderson, a New York Times author, best-selling author, and Food Network TV personality, and we are lucky to have him to serve as our master of ceremonies tonight. Chef Jeff has a unique, inspirational story that he has shared at TCC's graduation at the Connor Correctional Facility for the last 2 years, and he will again speak with the graduates tomorrow morning. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Chef Jeff.
Hello, everyone. Wow, I'm extremely excited to be here again. I mean, this is my 3rd year in a row being part of the Second Chance program. And I want you guys to know that we appreciate everyone who is here participating in this great program. It is my pleasure to introduce to you someone who knows what it means to be given a second chance. She is someone who has experienced the highest highs and the lowest lows. Considered one of the fastest women in the world. The professional highs of Marion Jones have included winning 3 gold medals, 2 bronzes at the 2000 Sydney Olympics, and playing with the Tulsa Shock WNBA team. But it came a time in her life that brought her down, which included serving 6 months in a federal prison. But she didn't let that take her all the way down, because she was able to stand up Though she came up under a lot of criticism, she had the support of an amazing lawyer, family, friends, and a community that always believed in her. So when you look at this woman, you're not looking at a woman who just turned around her life around while she was down, but a woman who has been trailblazing since her incarceration. She has been featured on ESPN 30 for 30 series as someone who has transformed the sports landscape. She also recently co-wrote a book, On the Right Track, that traces her personal and spiritual journey. What does that mean? Getting on the right track. That means finding who you are, finding that purpose, that desire, that dream to continue to keep up the good fight. Please help me welcome Marion Jones.
Thank you. Sit down, please. Good evening to you all. Well, thank you very much for having me here tonight, and I'd like to thank, is the chef here? But not just Chef Jeff, but the other chef, is he here? Because he deserves a round of applause wherever he is, because that food was good. So I just want to say that it's just a great privilege for me to be here this evening and to be the keynote speaker. I want to especially thank Tulsa Community College for inviting me to share some of my thoughts about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, this whole idea of second chances. And you know, as many people know, my very presence here in Tulsa is the result of a second chance. And as many, if not all of you know, that the last few years of my life have taken quite a few detours. And however, so many times when I speak around the country, people want to hear about the low points, and I'll give you some of those, but I think it's important for many of the people to hear about the highlights as well, because that's really what it's about. And so in October of 2003, let's rewind a little bit, I made some really bad choices, and I made the choice to lie to federal investigators. And fast forward a few years, and in October 2007, I stood in front of a judge and I pled guilty to lying. And during those 4 years, so much had gone on in my life. In addition to being pursued by the government, and here's a quick word of advice, don't mess with them. My reputation, and if you don't laugh, you'll cry sometimes. I've learned that over the years. So my reputation and my earnings had suffered greatly. I was out of the sport of track and field, which I so greatly loved, and actually I was completely out of sports. And at that time, I had been married for less than a year. I had 2 small kids. I have 3 awesome kids now, but 3 months after that, in January of 2008, I stood in front of that same judge, and to my surprise, I was sentenced to 6 months in prison and 2 years probation. 2 months after my sentencing hearing in March 2008, I reported to federal prison and started serving my sentence as inmate 848-680054, and it's a number that you'll never, ever forget, like your phone number. I served my sentence at an institution called FMC Carswell, which is just right outside of Dallas and Fort Worth. So, excuse me, in just about 8 years, I had gone from being the media darling and who had been on the cover of Time magazine and Vogue and Sports Illustrated and you name it, every other magazine around the world, to becoming referred to as the disgraced Olympian. I was no longer shaking hands with international leaders, receiving awards, or sitting in on multi-million-dollar deals with sponsors. I went from earning tens of thousands of dollars for a single 10-second race to just over 10 cents an hour working in the prison bakery. So never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would have found myself in that situation that I eventually found myself facing. The consequences of some very, very poor choices led me down a path that cost me more than anything that I would have ever imagined. I'm sure that many of you in this room tonight who have faced similar personal failures or messed up their lives in some way, be it through doing something illegal, alcohol or drug abuse, cheating on the job or in a relationship, or by making poor choices or a series of bad ones, understand exactly what I'm talking about. So, so many of us overlook this idea that at some point we all make mistakes in our life. And I saw Floyd get up here and so bravely share some about what he's been going on, but we all make bad choices, Floyd. We all mess up. It takes quite a man and quite a woman to stand up here and to talk to people and say, you know what, I made a bad mistake, but you know, I've been through it and I'm looking forward now. So I think I really appreciate the round of applause that you gave to me, but it takes a lot of courage to stand up here. So give them another huge round of applause, you guys. I'm also sure that several of you here right now can think back on some circumstance in your life where if you were caught doing what you were doing, your whole life could have been very different. For example, taking the dumb risk of driving home from a friend's party after maybe one too many drinks, or not being completely upfront on your taxes, or turning a blind eye, or not doing enough to stop or report someone who you knew were doing something wrong. I only bring that up is because while I was incarcerated, I had the privilege of meeting some of the finest women that I would have ever met, and they shared with me some of their stories of just making one bad choice, one mistake that cost them so much. My point is not to justify, minimize, or trivialize the consequences of breaking the law. I'm not contending that there is no distinction between being a wrong or poorly advised act and an illegal one. What I'm saying is that too often people look at those who have gotten into serious trouble without thinking about how their own lives or the lives of someone they know or care about could have been similarly affected if they were caught in some of the more questionable circumstances of their own lives. Because of popular shows like Lock Up, which I'm actually a big fan of, and other such documentaries on TV, which tend to show only certain types of inmates, many of those who are career criminals or those who seem to be risk to themselves and society. It's easy to form this image of a felon or a convict as people who are, they're not like me. But those are people who are second-class citizens, people who are outcasts and who don't deserve a break or a second chance. And the truth is that sometimes these opinions and fears, they're justified. There are people like that in this world, especially in the cases of repeat offenders who show no resolve or interest to change or better their own lives. But within many of these same prisons, there's also another reality. Unfortunately, this reality tends not to be highlighted very much on television and in the newspapers and on the internet because it might not draw as a high TV ratings as showing someone who acts out or who seems aggressive or unrepentant. There are many people who are or who have been incarcerated that actually do change and who want to change their lives for the better, but you don't see those stories on television. They want to do something productive and positive for themselves, for their families, and for the communities for which they come. They take responsibility not only for their crimes that they've committed, but perhaps equally as important, that their personal responsibility in bettering themselves and trying to do what is right each and every single day. They understand that somewhere along the line, their wheels came off the track and that they have to pay the cost of that, and they do their time quietly and purposefully. They understand that they need to take personal responsibility to do what they can do to get back on the right track. So they do these things not simply because they believe that it's the right thing to do, but also because they believe that that once they've paid their debts to society and they keep trying to do things the right way, they'll be given a chance to perhaps make amends for their actions and to prove themselves and others that they can make a positive contribution to this society. Of course, we then come to the big question of, well, what is a chance? Or more importantly, what is a fair chance for someone who's been incarcerated? I'm aware that there's no simple answer to this question, and that opinions differ from all of us. Some people believe that they should never give an ex-offender or ex-convict the same opportunity as someone else who is not incarcerated, or others are more open to the possibility of giving opportunities for ex-convicts once that individual has done his or her time and shown signs of really trying to get their lives together. And I'm sure that by your presence here tonight, many of you probably are in that category of being more open to giving second chances to those individuals who are making a conscious effort to better themselves. And this is a very good thing. In fact, in many ways, I think it's an absolute necessity. One of the most memorable and heartbreaking encounters from my time in prison involved a young lady who was probably a few years younger than myself, and she had gotten locked up on drug-related charges, and we actually used to work together the 5 a.m. shift in the kitchen getting breakfast ready for the other inmates. And one morning during one of our usual conversations about how she wound up in prison, she said that for most of her life she was straight as an arrow. She had no problems with the law or anyone until she hooked up with a boyfriend, and we know the story, got involved in drugs and became an addict. And, within a short time of meeting him, things started to spiral out of control, and part of her sentence required her to serve her first 3 months in a county jail before finishing her term with 3 more months in federal prison. Unfortunately for her, some prison rules require that in order to qualify for a drug rehab program in federal prison, you have to have a minimum sentence of 11 months. So the saddest part of the story came when she told me about how she didn't have much to look forward to when she was released, that she had only a basic education, and she was not equipped to deal with the temptations of the world that she just left, and now that she'd be a convicted felon, her biggest thing to look forward to was when she got out to get high again. Getting high for her was her escape from a world that seemed not to have opportunities for people in her position. I mentioned her story, but I was also struck by so many others that I came across who seemed to share, unfortunately, similar despair about their futures. As I mentioned, during part of my time in prison, I worked the early shift in the kitchen, and so I'm excited that Chef Jeff is here. He posted on my Facebook wall today that he was coming, and I posted back. I said, "Bring me a book, please." I'm a big fan. But as I mentioned, during part of my time in prison, I worked in the kitchen, and the reason is that I stayed on the camp side at Carswell, and it's considered a working camp, and I'll explain a little bit more about it for those that are not aware of how sometimes the federal prison system works, which is a good thing. I'll explain. FMC Carswell, that's where I was housed, is almost like 2 prisons in one. There's a remote section of an active military base divided by one main road, and on one side is what they call the medical side, and that's the part that you definitely don't want to be in. It's the high-fenced, the barbed wire, locked-down prison that you see in these shows. And if they ever did a lockup show on Carswell, most of it will probably be filmed on that side. On the other side of the street is where I spent most of my time. It's called the camp side. This is the side for people who didn't commit violent crimes, or those of us that are considered non-high risk. You don't have the simple same physical restraints. You're not behind barbed wire fences. You're not behind bars, locked in cells. But it's no country club. It's considered a working camp because once you're able to work, you have to, even if you're only paid 10 cents an hour. And inmates do everything from providing lawn care, cleaning services on the military base and camp to working in the kitchen. You may have noticed that I said I spent most of my time over in the camp. This is because, as I talked about in my book, I ended up spending a significant amount of time on the medical side in solitary confinement as punishment for trying to defend myself. But that's a whole other story that you can read about in my book. We're not here to talk about that tonight. But my first job at Carswell was in the kitchen as a pastry chef, and I worked 2 shifts every day. The early morning shift, getting things ready for breakfast, and then the shift around lunchtime. And however, after some weeks of that, I wanted to do something that I thought would be more impactful. So I inquired about other jobs and found that there was a chance to teach a GED course while I was there. I'm a high school graduate, I'm a college graduate, so I thought, gosh, I'm only here for 6 months. There's got to be a way for me to help in some way some of these women. So I'll admit that I was pretty excited about this opportunity, only because somewhere down inside of me, I think I was always meant to be some type of a teacher. I gather all the resources, which unfortunately seem to be outdated there in the prison. I was very frustrated by that and not in the best repair. And I started creating lesson plans for these ladies. And my heart sank on the first night of class when I realized how few of the inmates attended. But I took courage in the fact that although the numbers were small, I could still help someone learn to read or write better, which could possibly make a difference in that person's life. As the weeks went on, the numbers dwindled even more, and I heard the excuses and saw the lack of interest. And I'll be honest, at first I took it very personally that I probably shouldn't have. In fact, it took me a little while before I understood that, like my workmates in the kitchen with the drug problem, many of my fellow inmates seemed not to see much hope for themselves when they got out. Their hope was limited because they couldn't see a bigger picture for themselves or figure out how to get out of the world from where they were to which they knew they would have to return. It's unfortunate, but in many ways it makes sense to me. Simply learning how to read and write, education also helps you to develop your critical thinking. We all know this, the ability to see the big picture. Because they aren't able to read so well, to articulate their thoughts clearly or to critically and systematically examine more complex ideas, some people who aren't well educated struggle to make good choices because they might not be able to see or to understand all of the options available to them in this particular circumstance or that one, or appreciate the consequences of each option. Their best choice may actually put them in a worse position in the long run. It's actually sad because they probably underestimated the value of coming to classes and getting their GEDs because they couldn't understand the value of becoming more educated. The real challenge, which is one that TCC has bravely taken up, is to make education attractive and available to people who lack it, both those who see the need for it and who want it, and those who may not initially get it. By providing college courses taught by the faculty here at TCC to hundreds of inmates in Oklahoma, they are reinforcing 2 very important things. Number 1, that they believe that people who've messed up can do better and that they deserve a second chance. And 2, they will stand by and help equip people who desire to do so through education. They are making the value of education and access to great instruction available to people who may otherwise lost hope for themselves and have gotten swallowed back into trouble upon their release from prison. The truth is that programs like these are needed because they prepare inmates for a more effective re-entry into society. I've already talked a bit about the importance of education to critically thinking through situations and to making better choices, but it's also a door opener. One very important door for those re-entering society is being able to secure employment. As I learned, one of the greatest anxieties that most inmates have is about not being able to find a job once they're released. Incarceration not only puts an emotional strain on family members on the outside, but a financial one too. In some cases, the person that's incarcerated was one of the main breadwinners in their families or in their households, and the loss of that income is felt by the family every single day while they're away. Not only that, but their family members may have to provide money for commissary, telephone privileges, and other costs. Some inmates have to pay legal fees, fines, or make financial restitution to their victims. All these financial pressures can weigh heavily on and influence how they seek to make ends meet when they're released. And TCC's educational program and this Second Chance Scholarship help to address these concerns by offering offenders an opportunity to get ready for the workforce Inmates can enroll in courses that offer pre-release certificate and degree training in marketable workforce skills in computers, business, and hospitality. In other words, they are taught the skills and know how to make a difference in their lives and in the lives of their family and in their communities, and that's what we want. In fact, in the past 4 years, as was mentioned earlier, more than 200 students have taken classes at Connor and Turley Correctional Centers, earning 86 college credits. And at first, you may not, on the surface, it might not seem overwhelming, but until you consider how many lives can actually be changed, what can that certificate do to a family of 6, a chance for a job, the inspirational aspect of overcoming failures and mess-ups, or how do the better informed choices affect kids, parents, spouses, and friends? Beyond the numbers and the metrics that we can immediately think about, I'm sure that the effects of the Second Chance scholarships positively affect many more people in many more ways than we could even speak about. Funding for these scholarships, though, is absolutely important, and I applaud those who are currently donors or who plan to become donors amidst the unfortunate and disturbing national trend of cutting educational budgets. We need to do something different. We need to show in no uncertain terms our support for the value of education, especially for those who need it most. We need to make sure and protect our societies by equipping everyone, even those who've messed up, with the tools to become productive members of this society. That's why we need to continue supporting this great effort, because it hits at the heart of what makes this country so great, that if you work hard and you do the right thing, that there are rewards, regardless of who you are, what you've done, where you come from. You know, before I close, I just want to share a few words of encouragement to some of those who are in the program. As I've mentioned, I'm living proof that second chances can happen. I know that some may think that I didn't struggle with certain things that regular ex-convicts do, and in some cases that's true, but I did wrestle with many things that the public didn't see. I struggled throughout my whole sentence with it's how I messed up my life and what I was going to do with it once I was released. In fact, for weeks and months after I was released, I was still wondering how I was going to make a future for myself. And I'd gone from being famous to infamous, and that's a very tough thing to deal with. And even today, I still have that stigma. But I learned, or should I say I'm still learning, how to forgive myself and to move forward despite the criticisms and bumps in the road. And some days I have my good days, and other days I still feel the weight of my poor choices all over again, but I have faith that the dark days will pass as they have before. And, you know, last year I was given a second chance. I was given a chance by Coach Nolan Richardson to live out my dream to play professional basketball, and it was unlikely, given my age. I was 34 at the time, and history, but he and the Shock organization took a chance on me, for which I'm immensely grateful. I'll admit it was often a very humbling experience to sit on the bench, but I often made it through the tough times by my faith and my encouragement of people who were inspired to press on despite their own personal failures by watching me. And these people were motivated not to let their mistakes define them, and wrote to me and called me and told me that every time they saw me on the court, even if it was for 30 seconds, that it told them that there was hope, and that was a big part of it. So these were people who through me simply putting myself out there again, found strength to face the odds and the critics and to try and live their dreams again. And so I want to encourage you, especially during your tougher days, maybe when the schoolwork seems too hard, or trying to do better or do right doesn't seem to be working, to hang in there, have faith that better days will come. And you may not have a storybook ending. As you may know, my time with the Tulsa Shock came to an end last week. But you know what? You have to learn to pick yourself up and move forward, because your life and your story, it means something. Which is why I stayed a few more days here in Tulsa to talk to you all tonight. I want you all to hang in there if you don't get the job you want, or people don't react to you the way that you want them to. I want you to press on in the face of critics and self-doubt. I want you to not beat yourself up about your failures and let your past define you. And I tell you this because I've been there. You know, this is not just somebody who's, you have read it in a book. I've lived it, so I'm telling you what I know. And the young people that I have the privilege to speak to, that's what I tell them. You know, you guys, I'm not a parent. I am a parent, but I'm not the type of parent who's telling you don't do these bad things and who've never lived through it. I've lived through it, and so I'm telling you that the best is yet to come for you. I want you to show your appreciation to those who make this second chance scholarship possible by completing the programs and doing your best to use what they taught you in a positive way. Remember that your success affects the life of the program. So the better that you do, the greater the chance that others will also benefit from such a tremendous opportunity too. So in closing, I want to thank the Tulsa Community College President Tom McEwen, I think that's how you pronounce it, and the entire TCC West Campus staff that are here tonight for all their great and important work that they do with corrections education. I'd also like to thank the donors, past, present, who make this tremendous program possible. Your generosity is absolutely making the difference. You saw 2 examples of that today. Finally, and I also just want to thank the City of Tulsa for supporting me over the last few years in all of my endeavors, and just want to tell you and encourage you all to continue making a difference in these young people's lives, because it's absolutely worth it. And on that, that's the end. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.